And we want to talk specifically about the men that you have written two large books about, the Black Robe Regiment. How did you get interested in them? Just a short history of that. And why is this important to us today?
Yeah, well, Eric, I have been preaching the need for Christians and pastors to connect all of their lives together. You know, the founders would have seen the way we compartmentalize our lives into the secular and the sacred as just absurd. So I've always been preaching these things, but about, 8 or 9 years ago, I began to hear more about our history. About 6 years ago, I heard about the Black Robed Regiment. I first thought, well, they must be judges, black robes. I found out they were the preachers. So I said, hey, I need to know more about this. And just one thing has led to the next. And now it's a major part of my life and my ministry, because if we do not awaken the pulpit of today, then we're going to lose the liberties that the pulpit of the 18th century earned for us.
So, Dan, now that we've kind of set up what you understand about the Black Robe Regiment, and I think you are the key historian on this. I don't know anybody that has a grip on it like you do. And I want you to kind of crawl into the minds of the pastors of the Revolutionary era, the Black Robe Regiment, and answer some of these questions that are pertinent to us today about what's going on around us. First, can you imagine that these men would ever have envisioned the need for something called Pulpit Freedom Sunday?
Oh, my goodness, no. They believed that preaching the whole gospel was dealing with everything, including civil government. They believed that was of God, and they believed as Christians they had a unique responsibility to be involved at the greatest level, whether it was in their towns or in their state or whatever it was. They were completely involved. This would be totally foreign to them.
And since 1954 with the Johnson Amendment, since then we've seen the federal government take more and more freedoms away from the pulpits, or at least try to intimidate them into silence. I'm sure those men in the 1700s, the 1800s, they would not have ever dreamed this would happen. Concerning the recent subpoenaed demands by the lesbian mayor of Houston, her name is Anise Parker, for the pastors who opposed her ordinance to make public restrooms in the city both neither men or women but unisex, she wants their sermon notes and all their private communications concerning this controversy. What would these men, the black-robed guys, what would they say about that kind of encroachment?
Well, Eric, they fought a war over that very principle. They said, no, the king does not have this kind of authority, nor any other government official. And these pastors recruited the men of their churches and went off to fight for the liberty to preach and teach and live as they believed the Bible dictated to them.
There's more to this, too. You think about our porous borders. I can't imagine that those who were putting our country together in the formulation stages and then the founders of the nation, let alone the preachers and the pulpits, would ever have imagined that we would have a porous border as we do. Now, these were all people who came from other countries. They were people who came here to find freedom. But when you consider that our freedoms are really at stake with our borders being so porous, what do you think they would have said about the situation that we are in today with our federal government having one single thing there to do, and that's to protect us and give us national security, but they're not doing it? What would these men have said about that?
Oh, those men would have had a great deal to say about it. Peter Muhlenberg, who's kind of the quintessential Black Robe Regiment preacher, his entire family was from Germany. So they were from, Europe. But once they came to America, they were Americans, and they believed in what America stood for and the freedoms that we have. So these men would have been adamantly opposed to open borders. In fact, the colonies were all founded by different Christian denominations, and they were so protective of the precepts that they would not allow other pastors from other colonies, if they didn't embrace their own biblical faith, to even come into their colonies. That's how closely they guarded their borders. So what we have going on here today would have just been anathema to those men. And like I said, they fought a war to stop these kinds of things.
Yeah, they were right in the middle of it, that's for sure. And I think security was a main thing to them. They knew what it was like to have a foreign army coming onto your shores, and that's really what we have with these porous borders. We have no idea if terrorists and so on are coming through our borders. Certainly criminals are, we know that, and our border officials or our border guards they feel so hamstrung with the situation like it is, and our one single thing that our federal government should be doing is giving us national security and taking care of the foreign affairs, which is what this is. They're not doing.
Do you even have a country if you don't have borders?
No, of course not. Concerning the Ebola crisis, Now, can you imagine? They didn't see this coming. Certainly, those men were very aware of things like the Black Plague that had come out of the Middle Ages. But what would they do about the Ebola crisis? I mean, how would they have responded about protecting America and Americans from this kind of pervasive disease?
Well, Eric, all one has to do is study history, and they know exactly what they would be doing now because they did it then. They would quarantine these people, not out of hatred, not out of lack of love, but out of love for all of those others that they're protecting, and they would have made certain that those people did not come into contact with those who did not have the disease. So they did it. We know what they would have done, and they were successful even in a day when they had little scientific knowledge like we have today. They were able to stop the plagues in America, early America, and here we are with all of this knowledge, but because of political correctness, we think it's not fair that only West Africans have this disease, so we want to share in it. It's absurd. It's absurd.